Jack Doohan has been replaced by Alpine, and it's exactly the one man he hoped would be a wind in his sails, his manager Flavio Briatore. After being appointed as a team principal of Alpine, Briatore decided to give Colapinto 5 races in order to prove himself. But how will this play out in the big picture of the French squad? And more importantly, what should we expect regarding Doohan's future in the sport? One of the most intriguing stories in the world of Formula 1 revolves around Jack Doohan and Alpine. The French squad has decided to replace Doohan with the hotshot Colapinto, who proved last year that he can score points on the get-go with Williams. But whether or not this is the smartest decision, time will tell, because we cannot forget the crashes that Colapinto had in races like Sao Paulo and Las Vegas, which put a dent in the hopes that he's a reliable long-term candidate for a seat. However, Alpine is in a very difficult situation right now. Gasly is the only point scorer for the team, having amassed 7 points in the Constructors' Championship, and the team desperately needs a second driver to score points. On the other hand, while Doohan is one of the 3 competitors who are still pointless in the 2025 season, his gap to Gasly wasn't actually that big, 0.350 seconds on average. And yep, qualifying went heavily in Gasly's favour, 5-1, but Doohan being sacked after the first weekend of out-qualifying Gasly is a bit too much to process. According to Flavio Briatore, who is now the team principal of Alpine, the team is in a position to change their drivers according to what they need right now. And when talking about this to a greater extent, he went on to say, "Having reviewed the opening races of the season, we have come to the decision to put Franco in the car alongside Pierre for the next 5 races. With the field being so closely matched this year and with a competitive car, which the team has drastically improved in the past 12 months, we are in a position where we see the need to rotate our lineup. We also know the 2026 season will be an important one for the team, and having a complete and fair assessment of the drivers this season is the right thing to do in order to maximise our ambitions next year. We continue to support Jack on the team, but the next 5 races will give us an opportunity to try something different, and after this time period we will assess our options." Of course, we knew that a scenario like this would have come sooner rather than later. We are talking about a driver who was under constant pressure from day one, ever since he was given the 1 race probe back with Alpine at the last race in 2024 in Abu Dhabi. Briatore said it himself, "You're going to be under a lot of pressure," and the fact he pursued young talents like Colapinto and Paul Aron being signed as reserve drivers goes to show that the Aussie was under tremendous pressure before he even got accustomed properly to the Alpine seat. But the crashes of Doohan were too much to turn a blind eye to. According to the Bill reports, he is the leader in this category in 2025, with just 6 races deep in the season with a massive £1.2 million. Initial reports stated that the massive Suzuka crash would have cost the team around £1.3 billion alone, but that number seemed a bit exaggerated. All in all, Doohan did seem like a liability in the first 6 races, but who wouldn't fold under the circumstances he was forced to perform under? Elaborating on the situation that he found himself in, Doohan has gone on to say, "I am very proud to have achieved my lifelong ambition to be a professional Formula 1 driver, and I will forever be grateful to the team for helping me achieve this dream." Obviously, this latest chapter is a tough one for me to take because, as a professional driver, naturally, I want to be racing. That said, I appreciate the team's trust and commitment. We have long-term goals as a team to achieve, and I will continue to give my maximum efforts in any way I can to help achieve those. For now, I will keep my head down, keep working hard, watch with interest the next 5 races, and keep chasing my own personal goals. There is definitely no doubt that Doohan has a lot of talent that can be used by other F1 teams, including the newcomers Cadillac. The second seat of the American team has been related to Mick Schumacher, but this was prior to Doohan's availability on the market. Now, you would think that with a proper manager, Doohan will land a seat elsewhere, or at least he'll find a way of working it out on the long-term basis. But given the fact that his manager is the actual team principal of Alpine, and the man who vouched for him to be replaced doesn't really really put Doohan in a great position. But what does put him in a good position is the fact that he will remain active in Alpine. Yes, it does look like a bad scenario right now because he has been replaced after just 6 races and without scoring a single point, but there is no guarantee that Colapinto is going to deliver killer performance from day one. The fact that the Argentinian driver has a limited number of races goes to show that Briatore might resort back to his old ways, and the only way that Doohan might receive a seat back with Alpine is if Colapinto causes a bigger crash bill for Alpine or has a bigger deficit to Gasly. During the Miami GP, Ted Kravitz noted a very important thing about Doohan. He is able to set his car up very properly, and this has helped Gasly a lot. The Frenchman started the race from the pit lane because of the changes he's made to the rear suspension, and he drew knowledge from Doohan. When talking about this to a greater extent, Kravitz went on to say, Gasly started from the pit lane because he changed his suspension back to much more like Doohan's setup. One thing that Doohan's doing is good setup changes to optimize the car, and Pierre Gasly felt that the direction he had taken was much worse than what Doohan was doing, and so he did what Doohan was doing and got his setup. So that's something that Jack Doohan is doing correctly. So it's not like Doohan was a total failure and the team learned nothing from him, and it's not like Colapinto won't have big shoes to fill. Points-wise, the argument definitely goes towards the side of the Argentinian driver, but with the change of a team principal, Oliver Oakes, one who vouched for Paul Aaron to be signed as a reserve driver, we should have expected such a movement to happen sooner rather than later. But this just goes to show why the French squad is exactly where they are right now and why they have tons of other drivers and high-profile personnel leaving the squad. It's a toxic environment, and with Alonso, Piastri and Ocon, as well as team principals like RB Tebel and Schaffnauer not finding common ground with their current leadership, it's safe to assume that the future of Doohan will be anything but bright within the Alpine circles. This isn't bad news for his entire F1 career though. There are other seats available, and while they might not be on a short-term basis, it's definitely worth thinking about this scenario in the longer-term picture. The landscape in Formula 1 is changing quickly, and the fact that he wasn't too far away from Gasly in the average gap, 0.350 seconds, will be a proper reminder to other teams that if given the right car, he can perform at the highest level possible. An interesting fact is the contract that Colapinto was given for Alpine, a 5-race stint involving a triple header in Europe, a trip to Canada, and then back to Austria, in which the Argentinian superstar would have to score points in order to elevate Alpine's position in the Constructors' Championship. It's going to be one hell of a mission, but the fact that Gasly scored 7 points goes to show that the car is capable of being in the midfield, maybe not on the same level as Williams or Haas, but still not next to last ahead of Sauber. And this is the part where Doohan will be preying on a bad debut of Colapinto. Yes, he is a very talented individual who put Albon under a lot of pressure in Williams from the get-go, but the crashes in Las Vegas, and especially the one in Sao Paulo, have put a big dent in his reputation. Alpine cannot mess it up now. They've already spent vast amounts of money on fixing the car instead of working on upgrades, and even though they're already focused on the 2026 season, a couple of $1 million would help them a lot if they can climb 1 or 2 positions in the Constructors' Championship. With all this in mind, do you think that Doohan will be able to bounce back after the unsuccessful spell in Alpine? And more importantly, do you think that there is an F1 team outside of the French squad who would be ready to take him on along with the challenges he poses? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, have a look at the video that's appearing on your screen right now.